class. What did we learn yesterday?
Can I get a little help before we start?
Not at the beginning, Wayne. Sorry, just because we gotta get started. What I will say is for your any file issues you have today, just make sure you create the files in somewhere other than your desktop or documents. So like if you work out of your downloads folder, that won't sync into iCloud. So that should prevent the issues.
The code that the zip file that
Yeah.
it's just not deploying, so I was wondering why.
So try and move it into the downloads folder and then open it from there and see if it will open in there, because that shouldn't be causing iCloud issues.
I think it is in downloads.
And it's still not opening?
No, it opens, but it's not deploying like in like it just has a bunch of errors when I put it in VS Code.
Okay, share your screen quickly. Let me just, if it's a 2-minute thing, I can help you out. If not, I don't want to derail all a class, but let's give it a try and see what happens.
Yeah. Real quick.
Okay, so that is because the code in it is using the username hack upstate, and it needs to use your username instead. So if you,
I had changed that. I don't know if.
So go to the files in VS Code.
Can I move this for you? There we go.
And go to DB and db.js. And then just drag that window out. Yeah. On line 3, it says hack upstate. It should have your username in there instead.
Okay. I'll fix that. Thank you.
And then if you hit save and scroll down in your terminal, I just want to make sure that there aren't any other errors. Yep, you're good to go.
All right.
So yes, Nicole threw in chat, we learned Sequelize. What is Sequelize? Do we have a basic concept of it, or do we understand why we're using it yet?
Not me, but I'll get there.
No, well, that may be the majority of class, right? We only got Sequelize set up. We haven't really started using it yet, so that's okay. I know we just did the setup at the end of class. What did we do at the first half of class, other than hear me ramble on about my background and other stuff?
We talked about some things that can assist us. I like West Boss.
Good.
And we learned how to delete, and then he told us that we had to do edit for homework. I know that.
Yeah, I haven't created that assignment yet. I'm a little bit behind in class. I don't have an outline for today posted either. So I will get to that momentarily, momentarily meaning before tomorrow's class. Yeah, we talked about different resources, and I saw that there was just a message in kind of the Hack Upstate back channel. Laura posted about the resources list. And so we've got some work to do on the Hack Upstate side to make sure that there is a clear, concise place that not only you can access all of those resources, but also a way that you guys can either edit it directly or send us suggestions for resources, and then we can like compile them all together. So that's something that we will definitely get over your way, because I put together a quick like jot down the notes of everything we talked about yesterday, but we can do a better job on our part in making sure that those are accessible for you guys, and you can get to the list and know where it is and all of that stuff. So we will have a discussion on that and get back to you on that. With that said, feel free to watch yesterday's class, or if you have the list from yesterday, feel free to start using those resources. I definitely don't want you waiting on us. If you find a resource that works, feel free to use it. Feel free to share it. Just send it to me as well, so I can make sure that it does get on the list eventually that we're going to get together for you guys.
I was meeting with her. That's why that's how that came about. And she actually she sent me 2 links. And so I posted the link that she sent me. So I posted it in the chat.
If you could post that in either a direct message to me or in the CIC Student C3 channel, only because I don't have access to your back channel, and that is by design.
What back chat? No, I posted it in the chat at 5:30. But I'll post it. Let me
Oh, if you can post it again, Zoom does a weird thing where you can't see the chat messages until you're in the meeting. So if anyone posts anything in chat before you join the meeting, it doesn't make them show up.
I just
thank
did it with you. And then I'll put it, you said put it in the
CIC Student C3, just in case anyone who.
I got it.
Okay, thank you. Karen posted it,
Okay.
Christy, so we're good. Thank you for posting that. And we may end up just using this and linking to it in Canvas, but there's some work we've got to do internally to make sure that, you know, we're centralizing the resources together.
There was another one too. I just sent to the one that she sent first. And then that link that Karen shared was inside of that one. So.
Oh, okay. Great. We will work on cleaning that up and have an update for you. Feel free to use the things that are in there, but clearly we can be doing a better job of centralizing these links and making sure that they're known. So we will do some work on that on the Hack Upstate side and get back to you.
Okay.
With that said, what did we do in the middle part of class? Before Sequelize, after resources.
Delete.
We did delete. We started adding some endpoints. We also got our message send working. So are we understanding how data's flowing from a fetch request to the backend? The backend's executing some SQL and inserting something into the database. Then we are running another query that is executing on the server, coming back with the data. We are using that data and responding to the front end request and sending it back in that way, and then using our state to update that data, right? So we did that flow not only with the insert, but we also did that with the delete, the practice of creating a new endpoint, of writing our database query, of executing that, of getting some data and sending it all back, right? So when we talk about traversing the stack, we're talking about our front end making requests via fetch to the back end having an endpoint, executing some code in the server on the database sending back some data, us using that data and sending it back to the front end, and then the front end finally displaying that data. Doug, did you have any insights that you wanted to share?
I mean, I kind of had, in our one-on-one, I had some light bulb moments.
I know I'm putting you on the spot, so no pressure there, but if you want to just share like the question and what the answer was, go ahead.
So one of the questions was just help solidify the sequence of front end to server to back end was, I had asked Max, when you're passing variables like message dot text in React, the server side has to be aware that you're calling the message string dot text. So it has to be looking for that. But then when it goes to look in the database, it has to know what the database calls the text part of the message, like message.content. And then when you send it back to the front end from the server end has to know what the server calls it. So each of those three pieces need to be aware of the naming conventions of the others. That doesn't sound clear at all, but when Max explained it, it made sense to me.
I get what you're saying though.
But So it's like, yeah, you just naming the variable one thing on the front end. When you pass it to the server has to be aware of that name so it can know it's reading the right thing. But then on the server, it has to know what the name is in the database so it can put that in the right place. And then when the server returns the data to the front end has to know what the server side calls it so that it can.
So in this situation, when we send a new message, we use message text. Okay, where is message text coming from? That's coming from our state message text up here. We know we use that in the form input. So where does all of this really start from? Well, the user types in a message, and we've got that on-change event that uses the set message text from right here. I don't like that color orange. Let me try for a different. Okay, so message text, set message text. Okay, now we say we want to send that message. So the message text now comes down into our message text down here. But what do we send to the back end? The message text is actually going to have the value in it, right? Hi, this is my first message. But what we're calling that is text as part of the body that gets sent to the post request. So now this post request comes over here and it lines up with this post request right here. Okay, now what are we doing? We're saying, hey, insert the rec.body. Where's the rec.body? That lines up right here. Okay, and what are we sending in? We're sending in the text. That text lines up right here. Okay, now we're doing that in some SQL, right? This whole thing is a await database.query. We know that's all happening in our database. So where are we inserting this actual text into? We're inserting it into the content column in the database. Well, where does that content column line up with? Oh, that is the content in my Beekeeper Studio. That content lines up right here. Okay, now what happens? We select everything from the messages. That content is coming in right here. And we send all of that result back in through our messages on the front end. So when we get these messages all the way back over here, this messages lines up with this messages right here. Okay, now finally, what we do is some work to get down to our messages list. And then in our received message, we're passing down the message. This is trickling all down through the state. And eventually we get down to referencing our message.content. Well, this message.content, oh, come on. This message.content is lining up after it trickles down through all of the props up here. Eventually, it lines up with the messages that are in the SQL result rows. Those rows are pulling from our content here. So when we actually reference the content right here, eventually what we are doing through the entire stack is actually referencing the thing in the database in the content column. I don't know if that made what Doug was saying easier to understand or harder to understand, but either way, what Doug is saying is accurate, right? Our front end needs to know what our back end is calling things. Our back end needs to know what our database is calling things. Then when we send that data back through the API backend server to the front end, we need to make sure that we're being consistent in what we're calling those names. Because what happened was we called this column content, but initially our code did not reference message content, it referenced message.text. And so what showed up was an empty bubble. It knew that the message was there, but it didn't know how to display my first incoming message because the database was calling it content right here. But initially, this wasn't calling it content, it was calling it text. And that's why it was empty, was because the back end was gladfully passing all of that data through, but the front end didn't know where to look in that data to actually make the message text show up. So, and last thing I'll say on this before I let Doug throw out another light bulb moment, was Larry ran into an issue where the data just wasn't showing up, right? And I skimmed all of his code really quickly, and I'm like, don't know, should be working, don't know why it's not working. And so what we ended up having to do was putting in some console logs. And this is something that you will have to do when you're working on your capstone, right? Because you're going to say, okay, I made the fetch request in my app.js, or let's actually do it in message input. I'm making my fetch request. This is supposed to get to the message endpoint with my post and have my text in it. So one thing that I can do to debug, once I get here, let me just console.log out my rec.body.text. Okay, if I can see my rec.body.text, that means whatever I typed in the front end and hit the send button is showing up. So that means it made it to the back end. Now, I don't know if it made it to the database yet. I just know that whatever I typed in the front end made it to the back end. If it isn't getting to this point, I know the issue must be before this. So what I need to work through is this form submitted. I need to make sure my fetch is working. Maybe I put a console.log message text in here and see if I can see that. If I can't see that, then I know my problem has to be down here with my value and my on change. If I can see that, now I need to keep going and say, hey, is my message text actually coming in here? Does this text line up with this text over here? Does this code run at all? Because if this doesn't run at all, this might have a 404. There may be a problem setting up our endpoint. Now we come over here, we get our text, say we get all of that working, and then we look in the database, and this is blank. There's a new row that may be in here, and it set our timestamp, but content is blank. Okay, well, now I know if text is showing up here and it has my message in it, that I need to work on my SQL query and make sure my SQL query is actually inserting the data. Okay, now that I've got all of that done, maybe I'm still not seeing it on my front end. So what I do is I come down here and I console.log my SQL result.rows. And I say, okay, is the data actually coming back from my select statement? Is it in the database? Okay, if it is, great. If not, we know, again, it's a problem up here. So now that we've got it in the database, we come over here and I'm going to console log out my data. I'm going to see what's coming back. If my messages are coming back and it's got all of my content in it, great. If not, there's got to be something wrong with the res.send. Maybe I sent back the whole SQL result instead of sending back just the rows. Okay, now I go a step further and I say, okay, I'm setting my messages in. I console log them from the data. I know they're there. I know it has the text in it. Let me go all the way down to where that text is supposed to show up and make sure that I'm referencing the right field here. Or if I'm passing it in with props like I am up here, let me make sure the props are right. So yeah, we did a gazillion things last night, right? In like an hour-and-a-half sprint, we got the sending messages to show up. We got them inserting, or we got the inserting a message into the database. What we had to do, get our state working. Once our state was working, we had to make our form submit working. Then we had to make a fetch request. Then we had to make a new endpoint on the back end. Then we had to insert it into the database. Then we had to query the database. Then we had to get the response on the front end. Then we had to set our state in. Then we had to update our component to make sure that it was using the right columns that the database was using. Okay, well, that was what, 10 steps? That could have gone wrong at any of those 10 steps. And so I don't want you to think, oh, well, Max made it all work in 10 steps without any problems, so I should be able to do that. You should be able to get a step done and console log and make sure that step is working before you progress to the next one. Or if you try and do all the 10 steps at once and it doesn't work, what you need to do is know the order that those steps are happening in and be able to console log them out. Because if you're able to do that, now it's much easier to find that problem. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah, I wish I would have like, step one, he said this. Step two, oh my gosh, he said that. I was like, oh.
So I'll make sure that gets added to the outline for tonight. Karen, I don't know if you want to like just keep a Google Doc on the side and I will use that to kind of compile the doc for tonight. But I'll make sure all of those steps get captured. Only we recorded this and made a transcript from every class.
I know, right?
I'll make sure that that gets added to the outline for tonight so you can review it.
Thank you.
With that said, Doug, did you want to share any other light bulb moments?
Well, another thing was just trying to like wrap my head around what a server is and what Node is. And my understanding is that Node is not a server itself, but it's a language that was created for implementing and running servers. That Node itself is just an environment in which you can run JavaScript, but it has a bunch of built-in commands specifically for starting and running servers. And then a server is just software that's running that can receive requests, process them, go to a database if that's part of what it needs to solve it, handle it, and return information. But one of the confusing things was they always talk about like servers as a server computer. So what I learned today is that servers are both software running is a server, but the computer that you put it on and run that server is also called a server. So server refers to the software and to the hardware. But the big takeaway for me was just that server is a piece of software that runs and just handles requests and returns data.
And Doug had me a bit stumped on that question because I was like, well, the industry definitely refers to servers as, you know, hardware running somewhere, whether it's up in the cloud or, you know, in your IT data warehouse or, you know, servers definitely are hardware. But at the same time, when we're coding out in Node and I say, well, make sure your Node server is running, I don't mean, oh, go to the closet and make sure your Node server is plugged in and has a power light on it. I mean, oh, make sure Node is running in your terminal, right? And so that is kind of, in my opinion, a bad misuse of the same term. But a server is both the hardware in which you are running software, but it is also used as saying, hey, the software that is running on a certain port, whether it's a React server or a Node server or a Postgres server. We've also started our Postgres servers. Whenever there is software running on a particular port, that is also referenced to a server. So when we say, oh, we've got to deploy our code to a server, we mean, oh, we've actually got to get our code running on some hardware that you know is constantly running and connected to the internet. But when I say, oh, make sure your server is started, I mean, oh, go to Node or go to React or whatever it is and make sure it's running in your terminal. So they have similar definitions, but there is a difference between hey, this is hardware that the server runs other things on, and hey, this is a server that is kind of like a virtual server that we're running in our terminal, at which case that's more of a software server. Any questions on that before I ask Doug for any final insights? Okay. Doug, any final insights?
No, I got nothing else.
Okay. And that's what I mean by like share those light bulb moments, right? And you guys may share them in the back channel, but I like to see them as well, right? Like seeing those light bulb moments go off are the rewarding part of teaching for me, right? So share them in the CIC Student C3 channel. I hate the fact that sometimes light bulb moments feel like, oh my God, how could I have been so dumb that I didn't understand this before? That is okay. Share those light bulb moments as well, because often what is the time is you feel like there's that one thing that you're not getting. And when you do finally get it, everything else after it makes sense. And so you're all learning the same thing. So if you share those light bulb moments with each other, we are getting near the point in the program where we are running out of concepts. We are getting to the point in the program where there is just a shitload of things that you learned and they didn't all sink in. So we're getting to the point. We're probably starting next week, short of Nathan coming back in and showing you guys how to deploy full stack applications. There aren't going to be many more concepts going or coming your way. We're getting to the point where you're just practicing this and going over and over again until you get it. Believe it or not, we are rounding out the spot where you should be able to do every piece of your capstone except maybe deploy it. And that should be a scary thought for you guys. So as you're finding concepts that you're struggling in, we have our curriculum built in a way that if you go for a specific topic, you can't say all of JavaScript, I'm just not getting JavaScript. But if you're like, we've used loops, I get that how the loop is running, arrays confuse the heck out of me. Can we just spend some time on arrays? Shoot that message to me. And if there is consensus in the class of, oh, everyone's not getting arrays, then we spend a quarter of class covering arrays. Or we say, oh, that's just something that you're struggling with. Here are a couple resources in Free Code Camp in West Boston, CS50, wherever they come from. And let's spend some time in a one-on-one and make sure that you get those concepts. And there is a very long list of concepts that we have covered. So a good place, if you have some free time, because every student in this program, including the teachers, have a ton of free time, I know. Sarcasm there in case you couldn't pick up on that. But the daily outlines are a good thing to go back through or go into the schedule. The schedule is linked in Canvas. So if you go to Canvas and go to the schedule and YouTube links, and if you click this little icon, it pops open in a new tab. I have named every day's class, and that is not just for, hey, what am I teaching that day? That's also so that you can go back through and review all of this stuff. So when you're in here and you're like, you know what? Movie seats is where it all went wrong. I was understanding JavaScript. I thought I was doing fine. And movie seats, everything just fell apart there. Open up that daily outline, because this is going to feel like a blast from the past, even though it was only 2 or 3 months ago. And it's going to say, oh, here's the breakdown of all the steps that we did in the movie seats app. And if we pop that open, you can go through here and be like, this is where it all went wrong. I started looping through the seats and I didn't get it. And I checked out in class, and that's what I need help on. So going through these daily outlines and just reading through what we covered. Oh, weather app. That was a homework assignment I turned in. I got it working. Didn't really understand it. Would love to just spend a little bit more time on that. Send that over to me, because then we can gauge in class, hey, is this something we should all review together? Is this something, a concept that we can review while we're working on our blog project, which is coming up? Or, oh, is this something that we just need to spend some time on a one-on-one? Or are you just looking for additional resources? Lots of different ways, lots of different paths that we can take there, right? But this schedule, while it looks like an overwhelming spreadsheet, everything is organized at the top by topic. From there, we go down and we have all of the classes named, and everything is dated as well. So I update this every day after class and make sure the outline is linked, make sure the video and the transcript is linked. Even if you remember who the TA was that week, it may make it make it easier to find things, excuse me. So this is a really great resource. Feel free to use this because this does stay up to date. So just wanted to share that as well. Okay, any other general comments for class tonight? Any things that we want to touch? We are headed into using our Sequelize models for the first time. We're going to get Sequelize working. We're going to get our Sequelize inserting our messages and deleting our messages. We might even get edit working in our messages. And then we are going to dive into project setup round 2, full stack project setup. We're going to get React set up. We're going to get our backend set up. We're going to practice with Sequelize again and get our model set up. And if we're ambitious, we're going to get our login screen, a front end built for our login screen, so that tomorrow we can dive into authentication, password encryption and hashing, and securing our backend data to make sure that users can only authenticate with that. That's all coming tomorrow. Today is all about Sequelize and getting our project set up for tomorrow so that we can hit the ground running. With all that said, any questions on anything? Does anyone happen to be lucky enough to be in a room that is below 80 degrees? I've got central air. It is not keeping up today, let me tell you. Sweating it all out together. Do not forget to hydrate. I am hydrating with coffee today, which is not a good choice for many reasons when it comes to hydration or caffeine, but that's where we're at tonight. And I swear to God, if Christy pulls out another ice pop, I may start drooling right on top of my keyboard. I was waiting for you
to take a break so I could go get one because I had one and it melted.
Okay, let's get our project pulled up. We'll get our server started to make sure that we are up and running. And then we'll take a quick poll break and make sure everyone's got things running. Okay, so let's share screen. I am going to, let me close out of everything that I have open. I am going to my code folder. I'm going to my week 17. I'm going to my day 2. And I'm actually going to make my new day 3 folder. I'm then going into my day 2 and copying my chat front end only and going over to my day 3 and pasting it into there. I am then going to my day 2 and I'm only taking my Sequelize. We're done working on this chat backend. We're only going to be working on the Sequelize version of our chat backend. So I'm actually going to rename this just so we know this is using the PG SQL directly. You don't have to rename that. That's just for reference so you can tell the two apart. If you want to, you can. I'm going to copy my chat backend Sequelize. Again, only take the Sequelize one. We don't need the other chat backend folder. So I'm going to copy my Sequelize folder. I'm going to go to day 3. I'm going to post that. And if you would like to use my code as the starting point for today, I am going to send this in the live stream channel so that you can use my code as the starting point. Oh, is that going to be, let's see how big that is. Oh, no, that's not big. Okay, that is now sent in the live stream channel. So now that I've got my folders all set up, I'm going to drag them to VS Code.
Wait. Just because I'm extremely slow at this point, at this part,
We've got a
Make
day
it-
3 folder. In that day 3, we've got the front end and the back end. And the
From
back
day
end is
2.
on from day 2. And the
Okay.
back end is just the Sequelize one.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to open my front end and my back end from my day 3 folder. I'm going to put my chat end on the left, my front end on the left, my back end is going to go on the right. I'm going to right click on server.js, open an integrated terminal and npm run start. I am then going to go to my front end, right click, open an integrated terminal and npm run start. And over here on the left, I have a cannot find module express. If you have this, if your server started, that's fine. If you do have a cannot find module express, what you're going to need to do is npm I enter. That is going to install all of the packages and make sure your node modules has everything installed in it that it needs. So I'm going to npm run start. Now that I have npm installed in both locations, I should get it connected successfully in my backend. In my front end, when I npm run start, I should have my localhost 3000 that pops up. No messages in here yet. That's okay. As long as this pops up, we've got a good starting point. And then finally, I'm going to do live shares with you guys for the front end and for the back end. And I will also send those in the Zoom chat. And so all you need here at this point is it should say connected successfully in your backend terminal, and you should also have your front end open. And that's what we are polling for. We're able to get that done. You are free to go get an ice pop or to just hang out.
Wait, so wait a minute. Mine says node mine app crash. What is that?
Scroll up and see why it crashed. If it is cannot find module, whatever, you
Yes.
need to Control-C in your terminal and then run npm install, wait for the install to finish, and then npm run start again. And you'll probably need to do that in both your front end and your back end.
It only did it on the Sequelize side.
Okay, that's fine.
It's still doing
You want to share your screen?
it. Yes. Wait a minute. Too many windows. I can't see.
Nicole, I will say there is a cautionary tale in what Wayne went through. If your code is in a documents or desktop folder that is syncing with iCloud, I highly recommend that you turn off iCloud Drive and keep a copy of your files. It would not hurt before you turn that off to copy the entire My Code folder and stick it somewhere else, either in the downloads folder or like make a zip of it and email it to yourself or something. Having your My Code folder or any coding files that you work on sync with iCloud Drive is a very, very bad idea. So if you have iCloud Drive set up to sync, I recommend you back up your files first and then turn that sucker off.
I'm not sure how to turn it off, but it was like that from when my computer had that thing. So
Yeah.
it's been like that since.
Question.
The problem is, Nicole, is that now that we're using more NPM packages, you have exponentially more files that it's trying to sync from. So this isn't just, oh, you know, it's been on for a while. It will only get worse from here, and it will get to the point where it confuses the crap out of itself and then loses the files, which is what happened to Wayne last night. So back up. Does not hurt to send yourself a zip or copy everything to a flash drive or however you want to do it, but definitely make sure that you are not trying to sync live files that have a node modules folder in it.
So quickly, can I drop it on the desktop for right now and then just set up a one-on-one to get it situated?
The problem is the desktop is also probably set up to sync. iCloud Drive by default syncs the desktop and documents folders, but not anything else.
Can you, so is
Okay.
this because we have too much stuff? Is this about the cloud being, or something being full?
It could be. It could be related.
Yeah, because mine.
It's not
mine-
exactly the same problem. Wayne ran into problems where like files weren't copying for some reason. And he did not run out of space. But basically all of those cloud sync services are not set up for developers who are literally working with thousands of JavaScript files in node modules.
How do we turn that up? Am I sharing the right screen?
You are, just scroll up a little bit so I can see what the error is in your terminal. Okay, so you cannot find module Sequelize, which means if you ran npm install, did you?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Okay, so that means you at some point yesterday did not run npm install. So what you need to do is run npm install Sequelize because it probably is not listed as a dependency in your package.json.
Control C, so npm.
npm. Nope, npm install Sequelize. Sequelize. No A after that.
Jesus.
Hit right and then delete. Enter. Okay, now do your npm run start.
Nah. Install.
Nope, npm run start. Okay, you're good to go.
So how do we turn off, how do we stop the cloud?
Stop your, or I can do it. To turn off your iCloud syncing, you're going to go to Apple up in the top and down to System Preferences. You're going to go to iCloud. You're going to click on Apple ID right here. From your Apple ID, you should see iCloud Drive in here.
Uh-huh.
You can click on Options in iCloud Drive, and Desktop and Document folders should be unchecked. However, before you do that, before you uncheck it, go make a copy of your files. Before you disable iCloud Drive, you need to back up your files, whether that's a zip that you put in your downloads folder, whether you've got a USB thumb flash drive that you can plug in. What you're going to do is go to Finder. You're going to get up to your My Code folder, right click on it and hit compress My Code. It's going to take a minute. When it is done, you're going to take that zip file and put it somewhere that is not in your desktop or downloads folder. So this zip that I just created is a backup of your entire My Code folder. So that you want to put somewhere other than your desktop or documents if your iCloud Drive sync is turned on. So if this was unchecked and iCloud Drive was not turned on, you're fine. You don't need to do any of these steps, but backing up your code, not a bad idea. If it was turned on, make that zip file and move that zip file somewhere outside of your desktop and documents. You can email it to yourself. You could upload it to Google Drive or Dropbox. Whatever it is, just get it out of your desktop or documents. Then once you have that backed up and somewhere safe, you can then uncheck the desktop and documents folder here. Again, you don't need to do any of this if it was already unchecked. When you do uncheck it, it will give you two options. One is to delete and one is to keep. What you will want to do is delete. I'm sorry, is keep. sorry, wrong thing. I said the wrong thing there. The coffee is not going to my brain quick enough. You want to keep the files. It is going to take a minute. When it is done, you can hit done and close out of Apple ID and system preferences. But again, do not do those steps until you have backed up your code somewhere. Wayne learned the lesson the hard way. You do not need to make his mistake. Best way to learn a lesson is have someone else make a mistake for you.
Please don't. Please.
And yes, echoing what Karen said to Chaz, you can ignore the 8 packages are looking for funding. Okay, we only have 6 votes in on the poll. I'm going to give everyone a minute. Again, we should have Webpack compiled successfully over on the left side, or at least have our front end open. They won't have anything in here. We should also have in our back end something that says connected successfully. If you don't, let me know. We can spend some time.
Okay, hold on. Mine say time to panic. Is that I don't know.
Nope, it is time to panic.
Okay.
However, we can easily fix that. If you do
Okay.
have a time to panic, we should look into our code to figure out why we're getting that. So in our db.js file, we have the connection failed time to panic. What is happening is you're trying to authenticate and connect to the database, but because it couldn't connect, it is getting a time to panic. So 2 things to check there. 1, make sure your username is not hack upstate here and is actually set to whatever your actual personal username is for your computer. And if that is set right, you should also make sure that you've got your little Postgres icon, your little elephant up here. Make sure that you've got a green check mark going on. If not, you should be able to hit the start button from up there.
Okay, one second. Thank you.
And once we get to that, we will roll forward with the rest of class. I'm actually going to attempt to turn on the second AC in my house. If it is too loud on the mic, just let me know and I will turn it back off, but give me 1 second to turn it on. All right, let's give this a try. Is there a ton of background noise? Can you hear that fan?
No.
Oh my God, that's a miracle. Okay.
Max, don't kill me. So I did, because I used your code. It did say hack upstate. I changed it to mine and I'm still getting the time to panic.
Go ahead, share screen. Let's
Okay.
unpanic you.
Thank you.
What should we be getting right now?
Connected successfully at the bottom of your backend terminal.
Okay.
Okay, time to panic. You are good there. Do you have the Postgres app open?
I do. I'm trying to move this bar that's directly in front of my face. Okay. I do.
Okay, go ahead and click open Postgres there.
Okay. Oh.
And confirming that your you can hit check automatically, that's fine. Confirming that the username that you typed in is the username that you see on that second one right there.
Sorry.
Okay. Try and scroll up in your terminal. Let's see what the error is.
Okay.
Max, I can't find the survey, but I did connect successfully. So you copy
Okay,
which one.
cool. Keep going up. Okay, so database chat does not exist. So that's because you're behind from the other day where we created the database in the first place.
Gotcha.
So this will be a good review for everyone to create the database. So you're going to pop open Beekeeper Studio for me.
Gotcha. Okay.
Drag that. Oh, it looks like you already have it running in your dock. That's the one that we want to use.
Okay.
Okay, so go to your.
Sorry. This from the other day. The other day.
Yep. So hit the little plus icon up at the top.
This first.
No, nope, you had it right first. That one.
Okay.
Okay, and we're going to type in create database chat with a semicolon at the end.
Are we supposed to hit? Oh, never mind. Are we supposed to hit that down arrow next to her name? or no?
Scotty didn't have the database
okay,
created
okay.
in the first place.
Oh,
So
okay.
the chat wouldn't have been there. So if you go ahead and click run on that, now if you go up to the little refresh icon up here, and then open this drop down, you're now going to have the chat app. So now, I'm sorry, the chat database. And so now if you go back to your VS Code and click down in your terminal and hit Control-C to stop it. Try clicking down there again. Yep, now hit Control-C, then hit Up Enter to restart it. We are connected successfully.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay, any last questions before we move forward?
My zip is finally compressed and I used to just email it to myself.
Yeah, if it's small enough to email to yourself, that's fine. If not, you might want to upload it to like Google Drive or Dropbox or something. When your file is in a zip, it's one big file according to Dropbox and iCloud and all of those. So it won't panic. It will do everything fine. It's just when we've got like literally thousands of files in our node modules that crap hits the fan.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we good to move forward here? Okay, let me just pull up what we are doing. Okay, so part of the object relational mapper or the ORM is that it needs to know the whole point of an ORM is to take the data we have in SQL and represent that data in a JavaScript object. And the way that we do that, it makes it so that we can update the object and call a save function, and that will automatically update in the database for us. So what we need to do in order to give it a heads up of what does the data look like in the database, we have to create what is called a model. We are modeling out what the data is going to look like in the database. So what we do here is we create a new file, and I am going to call it message.js. And in my message.js, I need to pull in the data types that come in from Sequelize. And once I have access to those data types, I can start defining out what my model is going to look like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, we're exporting out something. And what we are going to do, what we're exporting out is a definition of a model. So we define the model as saying, hey, we use the message table here. So this is the name of the model and what the what table it's going to use in the database. Then we need to tell it what kind of columns are going to be in that message table. Well, there's going to be an ID, and that ID is going to have a couple different things related to it. One, it's always got to have a type. So we're going to say the type is data type.integer. The ID also gets a primary key. And we want it to auto increment. We also know that there is a content column, and the content has a data type of text. And finally, we had a timestamp, and that timestamp had a data type of date. And there was one more I forgot, a received, and the received has a data type of Boolean. Okay, I know that's a lot of code right now, but from a high level, let's just think through what it's doing. First, data types is something that Sequelize understands, right? Sequelize defines our data types for us. So we pull that in from the Sequelize package. Then we set up our module.exports because we want to reference our messages elsewhere in our code. So because we need to use our messages in other files, we're going to export it from this model. Then we get access to the database. You're going to see how that works in a second. And what we're doing is we're telling the database to define a new model called message. So this is what is lining it up with the message table in the database. Then we need to go through and tell it, what does our model look like? What does our table look like? Because for every table, we're going to have a model of that table to understand, right? Like if we think about a model car, well, we need to understand what the model looks like so that when we get in the actual car, we can connect those two things together. So ID is kind of a long one because there's a lot of things going on with the ID in terms of setting the data type, understanding it's the primary key, and auto incrementing it. But then there are some other things in our messages table. There's the content, there is the timestamp, and there is whether or not it was received. But for all of those, what we do is specify, hey, what are the data types coming from that? So we save, and we see connected successfully in our database or in our terminal. But if we go into Beekeeper Studio and connect to our database and look in the chat app, our messages are in here, but we're not actually referencing this anywhere yet. So what we need to do is import this file. So in order to do that, what we are going to do is go back to our database.js file. I'm actually going to split my screen here so both of them are up. And in my database.js file, what I need to do is import that in. So I'm going to say const message equals require, and I'm going to reference the message file I sent. The thing is that message file also needs the database connection that we use right here. So what we do is we take the database that we connected to, that all those connection details, and we pass it into the database of the message model. So in our message model, this database being referenced right here that we use to define things, we pass in from here, which means it's coming in from here, which means it's coming in from Sequelize. Sequelize is coming in from the require. So we literally zigzag a lot there. Let me annotate that out. We pull in from NPM. NPM then stores in our Sequelize here. We use our Sequelize down right here to connect into the database, which stores into the database here. That database then gets sent in to right here, which then gets sent in over here. We then use that DB to define here, and whatever gets returned from here ends up finding its way back over to our message here. So the last thing I'm going to do before I pull is in our code, what we want to do is after we connect to the database, if we connected successfully, I'm going to tell the database to sync. And I'm going to start a poll. If you see this down here, where it said select table name from information schema tables, where table name equals messages, you are all caught up. That was a whole heck of a lot. We're going to give everyone a minute to make sure they have their message.js file. The only two files that we worked in here were db.js and message.js. So what we did, we created our message.js. We made sure that was in the DB folder. Once we created it in the DB folder, we did the work to pull in data types, to export out and pull our database in, and to define the message model to have these columns and data types. Then we came back over to our db.js. We required in our message file, our message model, and we added in this db.sync line in our connect to DB. Once we did all of that, we've got some select stuff down here. If this select stuff came out in your terminal, you're all caught up, you are good to go. Everyone a minute to work on that.
Why is message capitalized? Oh, he's gone.
Again, we're not doing anything with this quite yet. This is all part of the setup. So if you don't understand fully what's happening here yet, that's okay. We're going to get things working, and then we're going to go back and we're going to make sure we've got that level of understanding through all of these concepts.
Doug asked the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, I was just thinking it might help me understand it better if you explain why my message is capitalized. How is that? What is special about that?
Give me a minute to think about the answer to that before I an answer I don't want to BS my way through.
And it's just the name of the file that's capitalized, right?
No, we capitalize it here as well.
Oh,
So
yes.
normally we capitalize it because it is almost a class. In object-oriented programming, I'm giving Doug this answer just so it's because it is the model itself and not an instance of the model, we capitalize it. So we capitalize it when we are telling it what the model looks like, but then when we get instances back from that model, essentially rows of that model, we would reference it in lowercase. So we uppercase the model itself to know that we are referencing the class, but then when we get results of that class back, we lowercase those.
So is capital message in db.js a function now?
Yes.
Okay, so, okay, I think I see what you're saying.
It is a function, and we know it's a function because in message.js, we've got an arrow syntax, and it's taking our parameters in and returning something out. So message actually is a function. Yes. It is a function that happens to be defining what a message looks like in the database, and that definition is a model. So you're going to see in a minute why we uppercase it there, but we'll lowercase it once we get the results of this model. We just haven't gotten quite there yet.
Okay, thank you.
If
And-
anyone is, oh yeah, go ahead, Doug. I'm sorry, Larry.
Um,
Okay, chances are you created your message.js file, but not in the database folder.
that's it. Okay, thank you.
And if anyone is stuck, if anyone's like, oh my God, what did he just do? I'm very lost right now. Just talk to me, let me know where you're lost or where you're stuck or what you need help with getting started.
Okay, so mine's crashed as well too, and I thought maybe I would have had the same problem that Larry had, but I actually did create my message in the database.
Go ahead,
Uh,
share your screen. Let's take a look.
Yeah.
This is a lot of steps and a lot of moving parts, right? So like, it's very normal to be having problems at this point.
Okay. I'm sorry, 1 second. I got so many screens going on. All right. There we go.
So let's start with the error. You have an unrecognized data type for attribute. That is oh, scroll up in your code a little bit. That is because you're using an integer instead of an integer.
Okay, I'm gonna fix that. And should I also, because when I fixed something else and I did the Control C and then run start, should I do that again? Run start.
You don't need to do that as long as whatever fix you're making is in the files itself. So like because you're going to save message again, it will know to automatically restart the server. But like our other fix that we had to do was creating a database, which means it was outside of your files. So the server didn't know to go ahead and restart automatically. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So just scroll down in your terminal.
Okay.
And that actually is all the stuff that we're looking for. So you are officially caught up.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Nicole, did I see a hand raise?
Yeah, I'm just still struggling to get these things, but I'm listening, also stopping and watching you. I don't know what to do.
Or do you want some help to follow along, or do you just want to let it soak in?
I think maybe if you could at least help me get the folder open.
Okay, so go ahead and share your screen. Okay, so you're gonna have to get iCloud Drive turned off before you try and do anything, because this is all the same problems that Wayne was running into. And VS Code and all of those files are not going to copy and sync right until you get iCloud Drive turned off.
Okay, I'll take like regular hand notes today then.
Okay. You don't have to wait for it to finish copying. As long as you've got a backup in the zip, you can just go ahead and go in system preferences and get it to turn off.
Yeah, I've been trying for a little while to upload it to Google Drive, and it just all my things just keeps crashing, so I'm just gonna wait.
Okay. How many other people in the class other than Nicole and Wayne had iCloud Drive turned on or having some iCloud syncing issues?
Mine was because I had a bunch of pictures that I needed to delete. And because I connected my old Apple account.
Yeah.
I just went in and deleted a bunch of pictures.
Okay, but is your iCloud Drive turned on?
Yeah, I left it alone for right now because when you said about zipping and putting it somewhere else, but I haven't had any problems, so.
Okay.
Okay.
Does anyone else have iCloud Drive on?
If you haven't looked, you might want to look because it's going to cause a problem the farther we keep going.
So again, Apple system preferences, Apple ID, under iCloud Drive, click on options, and then see if the desktop and documents folder is checked here. If it is checked here, that will eventually cause you problems because it is set up to sync documents. It is not set up to sync thousands of node module JavaScript files. So even if it has not caused you a problem up until this point, now that we are doing backend development and are installing packages, that will cause you headaches eventually if your My Code folder is in desktop or documents folders and is syncing. So if need be, we can spend some time on getting that fixed for everyone, but I just want to gauge where the class is at.
Sorry, Max, one more time. Apple ID, iCloud.
Apple ID, under iCloud Drive, click on options here. And then if desktop and documents folders is checked for anyone other than Nicole, Wayne, or Christy, let me know so I can know how many people need help with that.
So
Okay.
why I backed out was because you said to zip my.
Yep. You do need to back it up before you uncheck it.
Right, so I didn't know where to put it, so that's why I backed out of that process.
That's fine. You just, once you get the zip created, you can put it in your downloads folder. If you just take whatever the zip is and move it into the downloads folder, you can then disable the desktop and document sync.
And then you would bring it back and put it back on.
Well, no, you shouldn't need the backup, especially if everything has been working up until this point. When you disable the desktop and documents sync, it will say, do you want to keep the files? And if you hit keep, everything should work fine.
Oh, okay. So then there was that. So I didn't have that next step. So I was like, I don't know where to put it. Okay, I'll do that. All right.
I mean, ideally, you would put it somewhere not just on your computer, so on a flash drive or emailed to yourself or uploaded to iCloud, or uploaded to Google Drive or Dropbox or somewhere. Hopefully, somewhere you've got a place to back up your files. That is where you would want to put that zip file. But for now, if you put it in the downloads, it will be separate from what is syncing, and that is okay.
Okay.
All right, we got 6 votes in. Hopefully someone can come off mute if you need help, and I can help you figure out getting your messages set up. Again, what we are shooting for is that our select table name from information schema table, where table schema equals public and table name equals messages, that is what should show up in your terminal. So if you've got to that point, you don't understand what any of that's doing, that's all right. But if we can see this select, you are caught up, go vote. If not, let me know and we can help you get caught up. And if you can't find the poll and you do have it working, just come off mute and let me know so we can move forward.
I have it working. I don't know if I'm going there or not, but I have
Okay.
it working.
Good to know. We're at 7. I'd love to get to 8. One more person will push us over, or if you have questions, don't be afraid to come off mute and I can try and help you. I know this is a lot. Just takes time to get it all programmed out, right? I want to get one more thing done before we go on break. Wayne, just saw your message in chat. Okay, so we're going to roll forward here. So we've got our message model created. We've got our database connected and requiring it in. Now we've done all of the setup. So now we actually get to use this model. So what we are going to do is we're going to go back to our server.js. And in our get, here's all of this stuff that we did with the raw SQL, right? We had to write out this query. We had to get the SQL result, and then we sent back the rows. There's actually an easier way of doing that. So what we're going to do is use our model. And in order to use our model, we've got to import it. So what we are going to do is up at the top here, in addition to pulling in our db.js, I'm sorry, in our db.js file, we need to send out the message so we can import it when we want to use it. So in our db.js, I added on our module.exports line a comma message. Now that we've got it flowing through our database in our server.js, up on line 8, when we pull in the database, we can also pull in our message. Okay, now we've got the model. Now the database understands what a message should look like and what table it should be in. So when I come down to get my messages, down here in my server get messages, I can res.send my messages that are going to come from my await messages message.find all. Okay. I come over to my database and I refresh. I don't see anything here. And if I come back to my backend, now I've got a problem Error, Sequelize database error, created at does not exist. Okay, so I forgot something over here. The Sequelize by default likes to use timestamps. In our situation, we don't want to use the timestamps that they by default turn on. So what we need to do is tell the model, hey, we don't want the timestamps that you use by default. Timestamps false. Let's see if that fixes it. Come over here, I refresh. There's my first incoming message. And if we look down here, look what popped up in our terminal. Select ID content timestamp received from messages. Well, that kind of looks like the select query that we had written before. Well, how does it know all to use those column names? Well, we told the model, hey, we've got columns ID, content, timestamp, and received. And those columns line up in our Beekeeper Studio. ID is our ID, our content is our content, our timestamp is our timestamp, our received is our received. So that's kind of cool that I don't have to write a SQL query, because if I tell it what it looks like in the database, in the model, I don't need to write a SQL query. I can just tell it to find all my messages. Okay, well, if I can do that for my get, can I also do that for my post? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to clear out everything that's in my post, and I'm going to say, hey, await my message dot insert my message dot create. I'm going to create a new message. What does my message look like? Well, I've got the content, and that comes in from my rec.body.text. And I've got the received, and the received is false because we're sending a message. And the timestamp is still going to be a new date. And once it is done creating that, still res.send back my messages. Let me show you what this is doing, and then we're going to pause, make sure people are caught up, and then we will go on break. So it might be a little bit later of a break than normal. Okay. Well, when I come over here and if I look at my terminal, I'm just going to add a couple spaces down there so we can see what's happening. So I just hit enter a bunch of times in my terminal. Okay, now when I refresh the page, we see what runs. The database, Sequelize, did a select to get all of our messages. Why is that happening? Because we did a find all when we get the messages. Well, where's that happen in the front end? That's happening in our app.js is getting the messages by fetching the messages. This fetch is lining up with this here. We're using the model to find all the messages. That model is running this SQL for us. It's generating out that SQL and then sending all of the messages back. Okay, well, now let's test our post message. I go to the front end, I type in my first sent message, and I hit send, and my first sent message shows up. But that's not all that's happening. What else is happening here? We come over here, look at what's happening. It's running this insert into messages for us. And it's saying, oh, use the content, timestamp, and receive columns. And what is it inserting? It's inserting our message for us. And based off of that, we then run another select statement. So what the Sequelize ORM is doing for us, it is taking this object that we are telling it to create and mapping it using the model over here into a SQL statement that we see running down here. And because it is mapping it into SQL, what happens is we didn't write a line of SQL anywhere, but if we refresh our database, we can see in Beekeeper that Sequelize mapped our object here using a model over here into a SQL command that we can see running down here, which means the data ended up in our database over here. Mind blown. Okay, let me leave this up. Larry, what's your question? Do you want to share your screen?
Yes.
Go for it. Okay, so everything's going along fine, but it does not like your message. It can't find your message for some reason. So let's scroll up to where you require your message.
At this point, I don't even know, Max.
Keep going, keep going, keep going. Okay, so this is right because you've got it in right here. So that's good. So let's go to your db.js file. And scroll down to, okay, module.exports.
Okay.
Save,
Oh,
and that should do it.
thank you.
And we're going to poll, and we're going to make sure people are caught up before we go on break. I'm going to share my screen again so you can see everything that we've done.
It didn't do it, Max.
Okay, that was a problem, not the only problem. Go ahead, share your screen. Let's get it fixed. Again, the other problem fixed, I should say. Okay, refresh the whole page. Okay, scroll up in there, and we got a failed to fetch. So the problem's got to be on our back end somewhere. So let's go back to your back end code. Do you have your server running somewhere? Your backend server running somewhere? There it is. Okay.
Crash.
Okay, so you've got an error missing column. So that is because we forgot something in our message model. So your message model that you already have open on the right column, we need to, on 13, do a comma between the object and the, so go over one. Other direction, sorry, between the curly brace and the parenthesis. Do a comma and, between the curly brace and the, yep, there, comma, curly braces. And you're going to say timestamps : false. And that's
Stamps with an S.
yes. That's because Sequelize is trying to timestamp everything for us, and we're like, stop it. We're doing the timestamps ourselves.
Funny, like, what do you call those things? Quotes.
Nope, you're good there. Just save. And go back to your front end and refresh. I like
Thank you.
that. Go ahead, Christy.
When I did this, I got this.
If you share your right monitor, all we see is Slack.
Oh, wait, no, stop share. Share screen. Oh yeah, this one.
Okay, so failed to fetch is something on the back end. So let's go to your back end terminal. Do you have the server running? So right click, open an integrated terminal, npm run start.
I did that earlier.
Oh, you know what? Before you do that, there's a see where it says node over on the right hand side. Click on that. There you go. There's your server. So scroll all the way down. And you've got message is not defined. Scroll up a little bit. You've got message is not defined on server 43. So let's go to your server file, server.js,
Oh,
and scroll all the way up to the top. And we need to do a comma message right there to tell it, hey, we want to pull in the message that's coming from the DB file. It's going to be a capital M. And save. Then scroll all the way down in your terminal just to see what the new errors are. Okay, now refresh in your front end. Refresh the whole page. No. Refresh the whole page. Okay, so we still have an error. Let's go back to your backend code. And scroll up a little bit. Now it's saying it doesn't know what create is. So let's go to your db.js file and scroll all the way down to the bottom. And we've got to export our message so that we can import it as well. So comma message there. Save. Okay, go back to your front end and refresh. Oh. Okay, you don't like that. Go back to your backend code. Go to your server.js. And let's look at the GET request because that's where it's failing, right? So what we did, keep going. No whammies. Stop. You're still using your select query in here to get all the messages using the database, the raw SQL. So what we want to do is instead of using all of that stuff, so you can delete out 27 through 37. What we want to do, go ahead and delete res.send. Parentheses, curly braces, messages, colon. No, lowercase m. Messages, colon, not semicolon. Okay, then we are going to say await.
inside.
AWAIT space. And now we're going to use the message model that we just imported. So capital M for message. Dot find all with parentheses at the end. Opening, closing. Okay, save. Go back to your browser, refresh. Oh, I thought that was going to do it. I was feeling good. Empty response, failed to fetch. Go back to your backend terminal. Scroll down to the bottom of the terminal. Nope, 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 not of the file of the terminal. Okay, now it said error missing column. That's because it's trying to create a timestamps column that we already have. So if you go back to the message model,
Here or in the thing, in here?
no, in the messages file, in the message file, we're going to put a comma on line 13 between the closing curly brace and the parenthesis. And we're going to do timestamp, curly braces, timestamps false. Timestamps with an S, colon, false. But false. Save. Go back to your front end, refresh. Into your browser. Yep. Okay, now all your messages are there. So that's a win. So scroll down or send a new message. Send. Okay. So we're scroll down a little bit to the new message. So you're good to go.
Thank you.
And don't worry, after the break, we're going to run through all of the code we already wrote without writing any new code. Make sure we're going to get the understanding before we go on anything else.
Could you check mine real quick, Mike?
Yep. Go ahead, Reed.
So the error that I'm having is this.
Okay, failed to fetch means it's a problem in the back end. So let's go to the back end and scroll down in the bottom of your terminal. Okay, so you've got an error that says missing column. Right there, error missing column under the routine. It's trying to do a timestamp column that we already have. So go to the message model. You already have a timestamps false. Okay, never mind. You already fixed that problem. Go back to your front end in the browser for me and refresh. And scroll up. Okay, now go back to your back end.
You miss an
And-
export.
Could be. Message, you got it there. Go to message there. Nope, you got it there. There. Everything's right there. Go back to your server.js. Scroll up to the top. Keep going. You got everything there. Jesus, take the wheel.
Is it 448 for the health office? Is that if you dial it from not in here? 448. Okay.
Okay, app crashed. Error missing column. Message. Timestamps false. Okay, so at this point, I'm legit confused. So we're gonna go to Beekeeper and content timestamp received messages ID content timestamp received ID content timestamp received.
But I say it's spelled wrong.
Pulling a max on me, Wayne.
I
All right.
am. My bad.
Refresh. Hey.
Awesome. All right. Okay. Thanks.
No problem. Okay, how we feeling? Are we ready for a break?
Sure.
All right, we're gonna take a break. We're gonna be back at 7:45, giving you a whole 25 minutes tonight. And then when we come back, we're gonna take a deep breath. We're gonna go through this code. We're not gonna write any new code. We're just gonna make sure that we understand this code before we do anything else. Once we do, we're gonna get our edit button working. We're gonna learn the joys of actually using an ORM compared to your homework. And then we're going to do project setup and call it a night. Take a break. We'll see you at 7:45 and we'll go from there. Kick that back off. Okay. So we're gonna start from the top down here. I'm gonna review everything that we just did, make sure that we understand the whole flow, both from the server perspective and from the hey, how is this running? What happens when kind of thing. With that said, I am going to say whenever I get to a point that you either A, do not understand, or B, just need a minute, raise your hand in Zoom. I really want to take the time here, even if it's painful getting through it. I want you to raise your hand in Zoom. So you don't need to unmute, you don't need to interrupt me. Just raise your hand in Zoom when you just need a minute to process it or have a question. And if you do have a question, of course, you're welcome to come off of mute. Just raise your hand and I'm going to know that is the stopping point. Okay, we ready to go through this? We ready to give it a shot?
My hand is on the raise button.
I was just going to say, I hope everyone has their hand on their mouse on the raise hand button, because at any point, if I say something and you're like, hold on, just give me a minute there, or like, nope, I got a question about that, raise your hand in Zoom. Okay, and I've got my monitor set up so I can see when the raise hand comes up. So we've been largely focused on the back end, right? We haven't made many changes on the front end yet. So we're going to start off there. Thought someone was going to troll me for a second and just raise your hand right now and be like, nope, still don't get it.
A kind of weird question, but
yeah.
See the at line 19 where you have the get and you have the where it's gonna request to. In line 8, why do you start with a full stop? Just a quick question.
Why do I start with a what?
A full stop. Full stop slash.
An extra new line here?
Yeah.
It's just to separate out like, hey, our database imports are separate from getting the server set up here. But that's just a personal preference. So like the computer doesn't care if it all looks like this.
I'm talking about after required, and then you have, you know, you have
the period, the dot.
Yeah, the period.
Oh, okay.
Oh, this period says start relative to wherever this file is.
Okay.
So what we're doing is the single period says start in whatever folder the server.js is in. So because we're in server.js, now because it's a single period, it's saying, okay, relative to the server.js file, where do we want to go? Go in the DB folder. So that's why there's a slash between these two and a slash here. We're saying, hey, this is a folder. And then that next slash is saying, now that we're in that folder, now go get the db.js, which is right here.
Thank you.
Okay. So we start at the very top. And I want to make sure that you guys have understanding of everything going on in this file, right? So raise your hand at any point if you're like, I'm talking about Express here, and you're like, I forget what Express is, raise your hand. So we start at the top of the file. Server.js is kind of our index. We npm install Express before we get this packet, before we get the server started. npm install Express. Express is a framework written on top of Node.js that makes it easier for us to build an API server that has endpoints. So what we do, we require Express. The require is telling, hey, go pull Express in from our npm package that we install. We then shove that into a variable called express so we can use it. Now we've got the variable, but we actually haven't started using express yet. So what we do is we call express that's coming in from our variable up here. And by adding these parentheses at the end, what it's doing is it's saying actually run express and give us a server. Now that we've got that server, again, fingers on the raise hands button at any point. If you need a minute, just raise your hand or you have a question. Okay, now we come into cores. Cross-origin resource sharing. Our front end wants to be able to talk to our back end. The origin of the request is our front end, but because it's crossing over into the back end and wanting a resource that the back end has across the origin, we would like to share it. So what we do is we pull cores in from NPM, we store it in cores, and then we say server. Where is server coming from? Server is coming from our Express server. And we're saying use cores. It is allowed to make cross-origin resource sharing. We are allowing our front end to access resources on the back end. Now we need to pull in body parser because our front end is going to be sending us some JSON. But when the JSON comes in, it's a string. We want access to the JSON as an object. So very similarly, we require our body parser in, we store it in a variable called body parser, and we tell our server, hey, use body parser, and the type of data coming in is going to be JSON. Okay, now we hit our Sequelize stuff for the first time. I'm just going to delete this out. We're not using it. We hit our SQL stuff for the first time, and it's saying require db.js in our db folder. Okay, so we have to pause everything going on here and go over to that db.js. Now Node knows that this is not an npm package because we're specifying a file path. So it's saying, oh, because you're telling me to go in and get db.js, that's not coming in from Node, that's coming in from our own file. So we go over to db.js. db.js is pulling in Sequelize. Sequelize is coming in from Node. Now we need to get Sequelize connected to our Postgres database. So we say new Sequelize is connecting to Postgres with the username hack upstate, and the server location is on localhost, port 5432, and the database that we are connecting to is the chat database. Okay, now that we've got that set up, store all of that information in the database. Now, before we connect to it, before we get anything else started, we also need to get our message defined. So what we do is we require in the message file, and that is over here. Our message file receives the database connection information coming in from right up here. So we come over here, our message.js pulls in the data types. The data types are so it knows what column that data is. Okay, we pull that in from NPM. We then export something out so that we can import it over here. Whatever is coming out of this module.exports is what's going to come in to our message here because we are requiring it. No questions, Larry. Moving on. Just kidding. Go ahead.
So is the data types that's in the curly braces, is that destructure?
That is destructuring a return coming out of the Sequelize package. If we didn't destructure it there, we could also write it as data types, and this would do the exact same thing.
Thank you.
So this is just a shorthand. Instead of having to do data types here and then also do the data types here, we can use what is called object destructuring and say, hey, data types is going to get returned out of Sequelize, which is going to return an object. Let's just pull the data types out of that object. It's called object destructuring. That's a concept that we need to go back over or find a free code camp for. Throw that on a list, shoot me a message in Slack, and I'll make sure to get that either in a future class or to send you the resources in for it. Okay, now that we've got our data types out, our module.exports, we're exporting it here so we can import it over here. Now we get our database coming in. That database coming in here is the database here. This database here is coming from our Sequelize up here. Okay, now what do? We want to define a model. The whole point of Sequelize is if we tell it what the database looks like, what the database model looks like, we can just tell Sequelize, here's this object, go figure the SQL out for me. We're modeling our object to look like our table and vice versa. Okay. Now we've got to tell it what is the name of this model. This is also the name of the table in the database. So we're going to say message. That is the first parameter coming from the define. Where's the define coming from? The database. Where's the database coming from? This parameter. Where's this parameter coming from? Right here. Where's that coming from? Right here. Where's that coming from? Sequelize. Where's Sequelize coming from? Up here. Where's that Sequelize coming from? NPM. We follow that thread all the way through. Here to here to here to here to here to here to here. So the database all the way from over here is trickling down into our database here. We then define the model and we give the model a name, which is also going to be the table name. So we say message. We then need to tell it, what does our message model look like? What does the table look like that we are modeling the message after? So every key that we put here is going to be a column in the database. We've got an ID column. We've got a content column. We've got a timestamp column. But we need to tell Sequelize what kind of column that is so that when we insert that data, we know what the SQL command is going to run. So ID is fancy because it takes 3 separate properties. So we tell it it's a new object and we send in the data types. Where's the data types coming from? Oh, that's coming in from the Sequelize package. Our ID is an integer. It's also the primary key and we want it to auto increment. So every time that we create a new message, auto add 1 to the ID, auto increment that ID. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, from there, we don't need to use an object because we are just specifying the data types. Nicole, if you are familiar with process maps and that will help you understand it, definitely create a process map and share it with the rest of the class. Because the worst case scenario, it just confuses people and they ignore it. Best case scenario, a process map helps them understand this flow, and that the more the merrier here in terms of understanding this. So we say, hey, our content type is a text data type. Our timestamp is storing a date, and our received column is storing a Boolean, true or false. Now we come into the third parameter of our define. Our first parameter is the name of the model and the table. The second parameter is this big object that is defining what models are in the database. What columns are in the database. And then finally, we use this last parameter of the define model to say, hey, we don't need your timestamps. We're going to create our own timestamps. You don't need to worry about creating columns for that. Just don't try and create timestamps for me. That is our entire model. I'm going to pause there. I'm going to give everyone a second, and then we will move on to the next part. anything at all that you don't understand here. I get that you read the code. I get that it makes sense. But if at any point you're like, yeah, but why did we put a curly brace there? Or this is going to sound stupid, but I forget what the primary key is. That's okay. We are all about sounding stupid right now, because if you think it's stupid, someone else probably thinks it's stupid, and that's why they're not asking it. It's not stupid.
So Max, are timestamps false in the message.js? That's because you said they were trying to send their own timestamps back and we didn't want that.
Correct. Yeah. So by default, Sequelize tries to be overly helpful and tries to keep track of timestamps in the database for you. But because we already handled our timestamp right here, we basically slapped Sequelize's wrist and said, stop trying to create timestamps for me. I already created one, which is why this is false. If we wanted it to create a timestamp column for us, we would have just left this out or set this to true, and then it would have created timestamps, a created at and an updated at column for us.
Thank you.
Okay, so now that we've got that created, now we want to get in to actually using all of this stuff. But before we can use our model, we need to connect to the database. Just telling it where the database isn't enough. We need to tell it to actually try connect and authenticate in. In order to do that, we have to use some await code. We have to use some asynchronous code. So we create this function called to connect to DB, and we tell it, hey, async stuff headed your way. Async stuff means I can use await, because the database connect is going to happen in the background, and I want to wait for that connect to be done before I move on. So we create this connect to DB function, and we put it in a try, because we're going to try and connect to the database. If we can't connect to the database and it throws an error, we're going to catch the error that it is throwing and get access to the console. So what are we going to try and do? We're going to try and authenticate with the database. And if we get into the database, wait for that authentication to be done. If that authentication doesn't work, it's going to throw an error, and we're going to console error that out. But if it does work, then we're going to hit this connected successfully log it out, and we're going to know that we've made it into the database. Finally, we're going to sync the database. I didn't really describe this line before, but what we're going to do when we sync the database is take our model up here and make sure our columns right here are in sync with the columns in our Beekeeper Studio. So whenever we modify our model, we call our sync function, which is just making sure our models in our JavaScript line up with our columns in our tables in our Postgres database. Okay, now we catch the errors. If anything didn't work in this try, and then finally, this is in a function. So we've got to tell that function to actually go run. So what we do is we just call connect to database.
How will that look in the front end? Like
Nothing going on in the front end.
nothing? Okay, thank you.
No front end yet. We'll get there in a second. I'm going to separate out the back end. We're going to understand the back end from top to bottom, and then we're going to go to the front end and understand the front end. Okay, finally, we do this module.exports. Well, we saw this module.exports over here. So what we want to do, the module.exports is allowing us to import it somewhere else. So what we do is we export out the message from here so that we can use that model elsewhere. Pausing for questions before we go to our server. This is all of our Sequelize setup. We have to get our model. We have to connect to the database. We need to sync our models in, and we need to make sure that everything is exported here so we can use it elsewhere in our app. And Any questions whatsoever. Doesn't have to be a line of code. It can be, why do we create a model file? Why do we need a model? What else could we have a model for? Anything whatsoever question-wise here.
Matt, so are we using a model view controller type of situation?
We are working our way to it. So
Okay.
we won't actually use an MDC explicitly, but this is our model. Any endpoint that we have here is a controller, and then our view is handled over on the React side.
Okay, thank you.
So this is a model view controller format. It's just we're not explicitly calling this a controller. We're not, well, this we are explicitly calling a model. But this is our model. Any endpoint we have here is the controller, and then anything in the front end is our view layer.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have any other questions on DB.js or message? Or Sequelize as a whole, or anything we've done here? Okay, from here, we go back to our server.js. We had gotten to this point. Now we've got our message flowing through our database. And the reason why it needs to flow through our database is because it's got to authenticate with the database first. So now our message, our whole file over here, has flown in, has connected to the database, and our model is now in sync with the database. So now we get to the fun part. Our Sequelize setup is done. Now we get to actually use it. So we go over to our server.js, and we've got our server. Go ahead, Doug.
If when you do the sync, if your model doesn't match the database, does that throw an error?
It will, and it will not only console error it out here and say connection failed, it will also give you more details in the database as to why the sync failed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so back in my server.js. Now we have to set up the endpoints. So the first endpoint that we use is our server.get messages. This needs to send the messages from the database back to the front end. So the request for that is coming in from the front end, and we are going to respond to that request by sending our messages. Now, where are our messages coming from? Well, we're going to wait for the database to go to the message model, which is right over here, and find all of the messages. Now, before, that was happening in SQL. We had to write a SQL query. We said select star from messages, and we returned back the rows. But Sequelize is doing that for us. And we know that's doing it for us because if we run the request on the front end, what do we see down here in our terminal? Select ID, content, timestamp received from messages. How does it know to do that? Well, that front end request is coming in to get the messages. It knows the message is coming from our database, and it knows that these are the columns in the database. So we don't actually have to write the SQL query. Sequelize is writing that query for us, running it, and giving us back the messages that it is sending to the front end. But our ORM works in both directions. We can use our object relational mapper to map the front, the request, the select, but we can also do it in reverse. We can give it the object that we want it to insert and have it generate that insert query for us. So when we send a message on the front end, we see this insert into runs. Okay, the post request comes in from the front end to the message endpoint. And what we do is we tell the message that's coming in from our database, create a new message. Now, what should get inserted into the database? Well, the text is coming in from the front end. and it's coming in the body of the request. We want to store that incoming text in the content column. This content column lines up with the content in our model. The same goes for the received and the timestamp. So Sequelize generates an insert into command for us using all of the columns and the values that are coming in right here. Then we still need to send all of the messages back to the front end. So we run our find all query, which translates into a select query that Sequelize is running for us. Then finally, down here, we listen for any requests coming in on the front end, which means this server is going to run on 3001 and wait for the front end. That covers our whole back end. Do we have any questions about that, the back end or Sequelize or Postgres or anything going on there before we switch to the front end?
Is this one of those things where we're going to, where we just keep practicing so that it will because I get, so as you're explaining, I think what I understand that the things that you're explaining are like, I guess you would say like the promises. Those are promises.
The await part is a promise, yeah.
So I understand that, you know, you're writing out the promises, and then over here on message.js, this is coming from the actual Postgres. And
Through
then,
the Sequelize model over here, yes.
right. And so we're writing all this, and then Sequelize is the operational OP something. So that it makes that part make sense, but understanding, you know, just different, you know, like the little pieces, you know, that we put in here, like messages, await, message, dot, find all, that kind of thing, knowing how to connect that, you know, when you're working on a project. I think that's the part, because I understand the, I guess what you call it, the gist of it, but understanding the little idiosyncrasies of the details is the part that's like, okay.
So the good news is that we are going to get this done, and we're going to get our blog done. And then what you can do for your capstone is say, oh, well, I need to create something new in my database. So let me go look at the model and remember how to create a new model. And I'm going to create my own model based off of this over here. And then you're like, okay, well, I need the ability to have a form on the front end. And when I hit the save button on the form, it's got to go create in the database. So let me go see how I made a post request and make that new row be created in the database. So you can start translating some of this operational project knowledge to your capstone project. The other thing I will say is you're like, okay, Max, I get it, but how do I know to do find all? That could be called search for all I know. That part we can switch over to.
One more question, Max, before you move from the.
Yep,
Okay.
go for it.
So in terms of like the database, and you use db.define, is there other what you call it, functions you can, besides define? Is there other functions when it comes to
you're teeing me up for the next question very well. So if so what I did is I did a search for Sequelize docs. Most NPM packages are going to have documentation somewhere. You can't know how to use a package unless someone is literally writing the code for you, to know what is built into that. So if
Right.
I open up Sequelize and look at their API, well, two ways of going about it. You can go to the getting started and they're going to tell you, hey, you got to npm install your Sequelize. And once you install your Sequelize, you've got to connect to the database. Hey, that kind of looks familiar. And ooh, this looks familiar too. And then after we do that, if we scroll down, we can test the connection by authenticating. It's almost like I read the documentation, put together a project, and then taught you guys through the project. But if you would like to go to the documentation directly, this is doing all the same stuff. We did our try, we did our catch, we did a console error. All of that's very similar to what we did. But if you get to this point and you're seeing, okay, they're breaking some stuff down, they're talking about new databases, they even talk about promises and async await and how we can use async and await to run our code. And now when you go in here and you look at something like model querying basics, you can see, oh, we use the .create. And if we come down here a little bit more, you can see we also used the find all. But if you are someone who is like, I don't learn by going step by step, I learn by knowing what everything is that's available to me. How do I know what .define is or .find all? I want to see the list of all of the stuff that I can do in Sequelize. That means you want to go to the references. And version 6 is the latest version that we're using. Version 7 hasn't been released yet. So we're going to open Sequelize 6 in the API docs. And Max was talking about the models, right? We did our model.findAll or our db.define. I want to get more information about that. So if I click into the model, there is a whole list of methods that get used here. And one of those methods was the find all. So if we click on find all, we can see all of the different things that it gives us access to. We can find where something is true. We can get into our SQL commands here all through using Sequelize. So this gives you the breakdown of, oh, when you use find all, here are all of the different things that you can pass in as the options. The same goes for our, let me see if I can find it, Sequelize. No, it's not going to be in our Sequelize. Is it going to be in our model? Define? Sequelize define. Oh, Sequelize define. That's a function we use. All right, it's telling us it takes the model name, which is a string, and then it tells us the name of the model. Okay. It also takes the attributes. Oh, how do the attributes work? I want to get more details on that. Oh, they're telling us we can use the data types and the name of the column. So this documentation is breaking down for you everything that we just did in class at the reference level. So when you want to go look up what you can do with all of Sequelize, you can go into the reference and be like, tell me what define is doing. But if you're like, whoa, big package, a lot going on here, you can also go back to the guides and go through all the core concepts over here to understand, hey, step by step, how do I use this code?
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Is that where data types came from? It came
It
from
sure is.
Okay, I wondered where you came up with that. Okay.
All-knowing Max just pulled it out of, you know, the universe and the knowledge and just, I use the documentation to find the data types.
I don't remember too much, but I remembered enough to teach my teacher this morning, Max. He's very knowledgeable in computer sciencey stuff, but I don't think he was that knowledgeable in like React. And I think he kind of just was doing it on the fly and like, okay.
Nice. All right. So let's round this out with our front end. So our front end, is here. So our front end is doing a lot of stuff, but we're going to focus on the API based stuff. So what we do is we set up our state to store our messages, right? That's a React concept. We know it's a React concept because use state is being imported right here from React. Now, keep in mind, whenever we see an import from, that is an alternative to a require. Import from is the newer version of require and module.exports. React just using the newer version. So what do? We set up our messages in our state. So whenever we set our messages list, which uses the messages down here, knows to update and show all of our new messages. What we do is we use an effect. We say the first time this code runs, this effect will happen. The effect of going out to the server, getting our messages, and showing them in our state. So we do our fetch request. This fetch request defaults to a get because we don't specify a method. Now our Sequelize code, it goes, it runs, it gets everything. It sends back all the messages from the database in the JSON, in the response that we parse out into our data, and we set our state in. Now, all of a sudden, messages list is like, hold up, we got messages in here. So because we've got messages, go into the messages and map over them. What is mapping over them? Just loop over all of them and give us access to each individual message. Now, if the message was received, hold up, we know what received is a column. If the message was received, show the received message component, otherwise show the sent message component. So as we go over each individual message, we are going to show either the sent message component or the received message component. Okay, we're doing all of that. Now, what happens when we send a new message? Okay, well, I'm going to type in my input here, and every time that input changes, I'm going to set my message text. My set message text is my state from up here. Okay, now what happens when we click the send button? Well, the form is submitted. So we go up to the form submitted and we deal with all of the stuff up here. Okay, now we come in and we make a post request. But when we make that post request, we are going to include some JSON in the body of the request that's going to send the message text that's coming from our state that is getting set when our input changes. Okay, now we send the message text into the message endpoint as a post request. Now Sequelize gets that. Sequelize uses our message model. It creates our object for us. It runs the insert into statement. It runs the select statement, and we get all of our messages back. That comes in the response as JSON that we parse and store as our data. And then we then set all of our messages back in using our state. Is there any part of the app that I didn't touch on? Do we have any questions about why we process it this way? Do we think we've got a better way of doing it? Give me some feedback here.
It was very clear, but at this point, my brain is too fried to think about other stuff. But it was very clear, and I know when I go back and watch it again, it's going to be super clear.
So what I'm hearing is now would be the perfect time to dive into setting up a new project.
No.
Only
Absolutely.
got 4
Absolutely
minutes.
not. Absolutely not.
Oh, I can do it in 4 minutes.
I know you
We
can.
know you can. We can't.
It's all
Well,
good.
if you do it,
This is a good stopping point. I am going to show you just one more thing so we can see the benefit of Sequelize. Do not have to follow along with me. Do not panic. But one benefit that we have with Sequelize is that when we want to update our message, if we look in our server.js, what we had to do is we had to run our, we updated it all in the array. One thing that we can do is we can actually say, hey, go find the message by the primary key. The primary key was coming in from rec.body dot database ID rec.params dot database ID. Now we've found the message based off of that. So we can say our message.content is now equal to our rec.body dot new message text. Now save that message that we just updated into the database. And once we've saved it, we send back all of our messages like always. So before we had to write a whole update query to get this to update, right? But what we can do is find the message in the database by using the ID, the primary key. We can then update the properties on it that we want to update, save it into the database, and then send back all of our messages. So that is another benefit of the object relational mapper that we are using. If you didn't get that, that's okay. We're going to be using that concept in the blog project. You'll get exposed to that later on.
So the blog project is gonna be like this, where we're gonna put in like pictures and videos and blogs and stuff.
We're not going to do video or pictures, but we're going to make it so, and we'll start with a requirements document tomorrow. Hey, I need to be able to sign into the blog. I need to be able to create a new post. I need the ability to delete a post. I need the ability to edit a post. Okay, now people who aren't signed in should be able to see all of my blog posts. And if they would like to leave a comment, they need to be able to create an account and type in their first name and their last name and be able to post a comment, but that comment needs to be posted on a certain blog post. So we are going to build all of that out. We're going to start with a requirements document. We're going to make sure we capture all of that. And then as we go step by step through that process, whoever the poor TA is, starting with Karen this week, is going to be documenting those steps as we go through them. So if you go to replicate it, you then have the step-by-step breakdown.
Did we edit today? Did we go over edit?
That's what I just did.
You did.
Oh,
Oh, that very last thing you did. Oh wait, okay.
This is editing the message text.
Okay, let me make sure that
Now that's using Sequelize. Your homework from last night will be using regular PG SQL. Oh, come on. You didn't think I was going to give you the answer to the homework now, did you?
And you would. My brain is going through a lot right now.
If it weren't, I would be concerned. All right, I'm going to go let you go. I'm going to go let you enjoy the eggs that came off of your fried brain.
Nice.
Feel free to share resources with each other. Please share them with me as well so we can start consolidating them. Video will be posted on YouTube as always. It normally is posted by like 9 or 9:15, but then it takes an hour or two for the HD version to be processed and ready. take a breath. I'm going to start all of this tomorrow. The only new concept that we're going to be touching on tomorrow is password encryption, which is a fun one, I think, for me. We're going to talk about hashing a little bit. We're going to go over all of these concepts tomorrow, almost no new ones. We're going to get you set up, and we're going to get you feeling like you can take all of these concepts right into your capstone, and that will be the goal for all of next week. Tomorrow, we're going to do project setup one more time.
And so when we go to Nathan, we're gonna deploy the message app in the
Or the blog, one or the other.
Oh,
I'm not quite sure. I'll touch base with them. It may be worth a practice to deploy both of them. So I will circle up with him and see what his plans are for that week.
so we can actually have a blog. If
You can have a blog. Now, I will say that our blog that we build is going to be very feature light compared to like Blogspot or Medium or any of those other blogging platforms. But we will set up a blog that has all the basic functionality of a blog.
Oh, I was doing a project on something else and I created a blog. That's why I was asking. I created a blog, but I embedded some stuff and added some videos. Okay.
Yeah, our blog is going to be primarily focused on making sure that we're understanding full stack concepts, as opposed to most blogs, which are like handling rich text and pictures and stuff like that. But the idea is that we build a full stack app with user authentication, and a blog, it tends to be the best project type to do that on.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
I'll stick around in case
Night.
there are any last minute
Good night.
questions.
Night.
I have a last minute question.
Go for it.
Can I share my screen?
Yeah, go for it.
So the my send is, it's doing, where is it? So for example,
Okay, so let's go to Beekeeper first. Oh, it looks like you're missing your ID timestamp.
it's skipping message.
Okay, so you've got text_message in your create, and you've got
Oh,
message
underscore.
text in your database.
Fried. Thank
I'm
you.
doing something right if I fried brains.
Oh my goodness. I've been trying to solve that all night. Well, since we did the post.
Just make sure you also have message text in your DB message model. Yeah, you've got it right there. Good work.
Thank you.
So I have a last question. So
Yeah.
if we wanted to do like a vacation blog and then have people come on and talk about when they went on vacation, is that
Yep.
that's something is that like a,
I would still, I don't want you to think like, oh, I'm building a blog that I'm gonna start using, because like Blogspot or Medium or any of the other blogging platforms, WordPress, are going to have all of the features that you want out of the box, in terms of like being able to invite other users into the system and that kind of stuff. So again, we are going to build a fully functional blog, but this is going to be for the purposes of, just understanding the full stack stuff. It will technically work, but if you get to the point of being like, oh, I want to be able to send a friend an invite to be able to write a post, now you're going to have to integrate your email and write the invite email and make sure the invite works, invite links are working and all of that stuff. And that's going to be a little, so we're not going to the point of being like, we're going to recreate WordPress in, a week and a half. That might be a little ambitious. But we are going to have a blog project that is portfolio worthy so that you can show user authentication and admin interface and all of that stuff off.
Okay, I got you. Cool beans. Good night.
Have a
Max,
good one. Yep.
you wanna just, I'm gonna share